edition of Church and State with Christopher Farrar and Brian McCall, where we discuss top story in church and state that's been occurring the past 2 weeks. Well, everybody, this week we are filming this has been talking about the Middle East, this area that has been a source of conflict and violence really for decades, for almost all of the last century, erupted with Israel's attacks on Iran. Then last weekend, Donald Trump authorized the U.S. to go in and bomb 3 sites in Iran. And then a ceasefire Donald Trump announced, which immediately appeared to get violated by the Israelis and then the Iranians, perhaps, and then Donald Trump's reaction to that. So that's kind of the highlights, or lowlights of what went on. What's your reaction? What do you think's going on? What do you think Donald Trump's doing?
So I was exchanging some text messages with a Jewish friend of mine who obviously is on the side of Israel in this ridiculous, endless conflict. And he was saying, well, look, Trump's not going to go the way of Bush Cheney. And I was arguing to the contrary. It looks like just another sellout to the neocons. He's been co-opted by the perpetual warmongering establishment. But it turns out to be a lot more interesting than that, doesn't it? Because he basically said, we dropped our bombs. I can hail the great precision bombing of our wonderful pilots, and the American military might has been displayed once again. And that's it. It's performative, really. Did he destroy the nuclear facility? Maybe, maybe not. Has he ended their nuclear program? No. But is there a nuclear program? Who knows? So this is all performative stuff involving the dropping of lots of bombs and hailing the American military. But that's all it is for Trump, apparently, which is what makes it more interesting. He wanted to make a show of force to demonstrate that he means business, that he's a real deal maker who doesn't bluff. And now that he's done that, he's fed up with both sides of the dispute. He dropped an F-bomb
on national television.
Israel. He said Israel doesn't know what the bleep it's doing. For him to say that about Israel tells you a lot. And we heard also that they were about to have another bombing run, and they turned the planes around Israel and didn't drop the ordinance. So he's pretty much done with the 12-day war, as he calls it. In fact, this is another strategy of his. He tries to brand things.
Yes.
And by branding them, he gives them reality. So the brand he's put on this is the 12-day war. That's it. There's no more war now. Of course, that war will go on forever. And I think he realizes that there's no end to it, and he wants out, which is great. Yeah. He's not going to continue along the lines of the Bush-Cheney nation-building, disastrous foreign policy. He went only so far, and then he backed away. So that's hopeful. And even friends of mine who were disposed to say, "See, told you so," are now admitting, no, it's more complicated than that. Trump is not like that.
Well, again, it's funny. His people were lashing out at some of the critics of this who worried about that. I mean, Tucker Carlson being one. They seemed to, lashed out at him. But, almost it's like, how do you blame people for being skeptical, after the Bush, weapons of mass destruction, which always reminded me of that line from the Scarlet Pimpernel, right? The weapons of mass destruction. They seek them here. They seek them there. They seek them everywhere. Where are those weapons of mass destruction? And so when they come out again and sort of play the same card, it's kind of obvious that people will be like, well, you fooled me with this 20 years ago. Why would I fall for it again? It makes a lot of sense. And even Trump himself was talking about, he made this sort of cryptic comment about regime change. So to me, I'm not really sure. I'm undecided whether this was his plan all along. Maybe you're right, was just do some bombing, get some shock and awe, look good, look like he did something, but contain it. Or if he was headed down a path that something happened, that he discovered something in the deep state or in that they were playing him or giving him false information, and he pulled back. I'm not really sure which it is.
I think initially he fell for the line that, yes, the weapons of mass destruction are about to be unleashed. But there's video out there now. We have the receipts of Netanyahu for the past 30 years saying any day now, Iran will have a nuclear bomb. He says this over and over again. He says it in the 90s, the late 90s, the early 2000s. It's always weeks away, months away.
Hmm.
He has this little chart saying they have uranium enriched to 60%. Any moment now it could go to 90%. Then it will be weeks away from a bomb. But there never is a bomb. There's absolutely no evidence that they've constructed or are near to constructing or were near to constructing a nuclear weapon. It's the Iraqi delusion all over again. And I do think Trump was told something that caused him to fall for it yet again. But
Hmm.
now he realizes, I think, he's being led down a path of interventionism again,
Hmm.
which is the last thing he wants. So he
Hmm.
capped it off. It's the 12-day war. Goodbye. That's it. Over and done. Let's see
Next.
what happens now. But it's clear. He's already made clear. We're not bombing Iran anymore. That's the last bombing rate.
Well, it's interesting. The other thing that's interesting, and look, you and I are no fans of Muslim theocracy. I'm no fans of Iran. I mean, I think it's, it's not a good place. It's certainly not a good place if you're a woman. But why the liberals, sort of support them. But in any event, what I find fascinating is that the Iranian regime has exercised incredible restraint. So, first of all, when the US bombed them, knowing how Persians, the Middle Eastern think, they had to do something to save face. They couldn't just do nothing. So they choose to bomb, try to bomb or attack this base in Qatar, but they call the White House, call the United States and basically say, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to bomb, here's the time. They send up a kind of a half-hearted, handful of missiles, none of which do any damage. And then they say, okay, now that honor has been served, you know, we can stop. And then when Israel essentially was breaking this, using the ceasefire agreement to like try to obliterate Tehran, they didn't just ratchet it up and say, okay, now it's total war. I mean, I have to say, I've been surprised by the restraint of the Iranian regime, which says that they're more realistic about power politics than I would have guessed.
Oh, they know that if they push Trump far enough, being the unpredictable fellow he is, he could wipe them off the map. This is what he says about himself. I'm unpredictable. You don't know what I'm going to do.
I don't know what I'm going to do.
And so that's a great bargaining strategy, too. You really don't know what he's thinking. He's not showing you his hand, and that works to good effect, at least so far. So we'll see what happens. Right now, the ceasefire is holding. He is not committing to any further involvement in Iran.
Hmm.
So now we turn to the domestic scene where he's actually doing well there. He's just got that major victory in the Supreme Court on the deportation of undesirables to countries other than their countries of origin. Did you hear what happened with the district judge in that case, though?
No, what happened?
Quite unbelievable. So the Supreme Court, 6-3, the three liberal whack jobs, of course, dissented. 6-3 that if an alien is deportable, but his home country won't take him back, under the immigration statutes, they can be deported to any other country at the election of the president, the executive branch.
Yep.
Supreme Court said 6-3, that's the case. Well, this district judge had issued an injunction, and he basically invented due process rights
Yeah.
for these people that were going to be sent to countries other than the ones that they came from, which would not take them back because they were horrible criminals, monsters, basically. So he said, well, you just can't send them willy-nilly to any country. You have to give them 15 days notice. They have to have an interpreter. They have to be allowed to plead their case under the International Convention Against Torture and argue that if they go to some other country, they'll be tortured. He just invented a whole panoply of procedural rights. A judge created statute, as it were. And the Supreme Court said, no, no. They can be deported under the immigration law to any country that will take them. End of story. So it goes back down on remand. And the judge says, well, the Supreme Court might have might have stayed my preliminary injunction, ordering you to create this remedy, but they haven't stayed my order enforcing the injunction.
What?
So now John Sauer said what was obvious in another emergency application to the Supreme Court. You can't say that an order enforcing the judgment or the injunction is not derivative of the injunction. So if the injunction has stayed, any order enforcing it has stayed, the judge is openly and lawlessly defying this court. And that's what Sauer says in his latest emergency application.
Wow.
And he also politely suggests that it's time to get this judge off the case.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of ways to do that. A writ of mandamus, would be one way. He stays on the case, but the Supreme Court says, you will do what we say and vacate your orders. Or the other alternative, just get another judge and put him on the case. Remove him from the case because he's obviously impossibly biased and cannot be trusted to continue handling the matter. But that's what's going on. The judiciary has lost its collective mind.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, that's so insane. That's like my ordering specific performance with a contract, then ruling that the contract is actually unenforceable. There was a formation defect, but my order enforcing it still stands. I mean,
that's the other thing.
If you were in my law school class, I wrote that on an exam. I'd be like, "You fail. That's the stupid."
You failed.
Yeah.
But that's what. Speaking of enforcing contracts, these district judges are specifically enforcing contracts for the payment of money.
Yeah.
Now, the viewers don't know this, but if a contract is breached and you have money damages, you don't get an injunction compelling them to live up to the contract to make them perform their side of it. You basically have a claim for money damages. So you go into the court of claims for that and you say, I was promised a grant and they didn't give me the money. So I'm suing to get my money. No, these judges are saying you must carry out the grant. You have to hire back all these people and pay them their salaries and let them do things that are contrary to your policy. That's such unheard of. As I said in one of the other episodes, why don't they just get it over with and issue an injunction against the presidency?
Yeah, exactly. We enjoin the presidency.
That's what it comes down to. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's. I don't think that the Supreme Court's going to get any summer recess, to be honest.
No, but this is a good thing. When judges like this, these lunatics, overreach and defy the Supreme Court, issuing increasingly fantastical injunctions, as one of the government's briefs said, then the Supreme Court knows we have a problem here and we have to find a radical solution. We have to chop this thing off at the root so that it stops growing. Now they know that they've got rogue judges. There's no question about it. So when Roberts says there's no such thing as a Biden judge, there's no such thing as an Obama judge, surely even Roberts knows that's just terminally naive at this point.
Yeah.
It's obvious there are Biden judges and Obama judges, and they're acting as surrogates for the Biden administration, the former administration, which they're acting as if it's still in power.
Yes. No, exactly. Well, it's interesting. I mean, all of this coming together with the overseas and but before we end that, I want to jump back to the Iran story. I mean, the other thing that is fascinating about this is, again, his reaction to the Israelis. I mean, cursing them out in front of national TV, in front of a reporter, and basically saying, "I'm done with you," is interesting because it's just sort of not kosher, to pun intended, in national politics for decades. And if anybody's seen the interview with Tucker Carlson interviewing Ted Cruz, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch.
Oh my goodness! You've got everybody watching this. You must. And you go to, I think it's around 18 minutes.
Yes.
Cruz explains why he supports Israel. I'm not going to spoil it for you. You have to watch it for yourself. It's the most ludicrous thing I've ever watched coming out of the mouth of someone I thought was intelligent.
But again,
full of himself.
It's fascinating that this, more sort of rational, critical thinking about, that a U.S. senator who's elected to represent his people in the U.S. Senate would say his primary goal of going to the Senate was to be a proponent for a foreign nation. Like that, you couldn't even call that out and say there's a problem with that before. That's now in discussion is, I think, a really interesting development.
Well, also, Cruz, I would assume, either himself or his immediate ancestors, is Catholic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now he's an evangelical, which just shows the looniness of the evangelicals.
Well, and that's the best part, when he tries to invoke the Bible for saying the United States government has to support the state of Israel. Tucker Carlson's response, I mean, it was the most Catholic response ever. Somebody's got to get to Tucker Carlson and let him know he needs to become Catholic.
But the amazing thing about Trump is that someone put it better than I could and more cleverly when it said, basically, there's a vulgarism involved. I'll delete the vulgarism, but Dad has come home and Dad is bleeped.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Exactly.
another way you could say it is, don't make me come back there, to the kids in the back seat that are fighting while you're trying to drive the car. He's
Exactly.
treating these two parties as children.
Yes.
So he thinks he's above the fray, and he views himself, which in fact he is, as a world historical figure, for lack of a better world historical figure, and he's going to bring an end to this childish nonsense. That's an amazing perspective for any president to take,
It is.
considering the existence of the Amen corner, as the late great Joe Sobran put it. And
Yeah.
by acknowledging that, by the way, Sobran ended his career. He was
Absolutely.
destroyed. So Trump doesn't care about the Amen corner. He just looks at Israel and Iran as two people that he has to do a deal with. And if they want to be unreasonable, he's going to call them out. That's great. I think that's just absolutely positive in
But again,
terms
I
of.
definitely commend the Tucker Carlson interview. It has got so many entertaining parts to it. But speaking of Daddy's home, better get your act together, kids. Let's turn over to Rome, and as we do, let's just sort of generally check in. You and I took a very cautious approach to this new pontificate, sort of hope for the best, but don't be naive about it, and give Cardinal Prevost Leo XIV some time to see what he's going to do. So we're in the end of June, about 2 months into the pontificate. Any general observations? Is this going the way you expected? Worse, better?
It's still too soon to say, but what we can say with certainty is there has been a drastic lessening of the threat to us, a major improvement in the situation. This is a serious man. He may end up being just another neo-modernist. I don't think so. I think he's got enough traditionalism in his bones that he won't go in that direction. I think he's going to be, I'm projecting here, some sort of peacemaker a la Trump. And he'll try to reconcile opposing factions. I'm hearing good things about supposed conversations between Cardinal Burke and Pope Leo about the Latin Mass. I don't think he has the Jacobinical hatred of the Latin Mass that the dictator Pope had. So I think that at the least we can expect benign neglect of Traditionis Custodes, a non-enforcement. Of course, the local bishops can be aggressive in enforcing it, pointing to that document. I'm not expecting a revocation of that, but I think we're going to have a much improved situation in terms of the Latin liturgy. And to me, that's about 90% of the problem of the restoration. If you just let the Latin Mass communities flourish and the new generation comes into the traditional liturgical ambit, that's going to heal the church over time. It's inevitable. The liturgy is the thing.
Yeah.
That doctrine comes right along with it, because people who want the traditional liturgy also want the traditional teachings of the church. And these are now overwhelmingly young people, as the aging, on his way out revolutionary, who was the last document of the Chair of Peter, recognized. He was actually alarmed by that. What's with these young people? Why don't they want what we're offering? There must
Exactly.
be
Why don't
something
they want our
wrong
hip?
with them. They must be sick in the head.
Why don't they want our outdated hip new liturgy? Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thinking of an ideologue,
Yeah.
as opposed to someone like Leo, who I don't think is an ideologue. I don't think the man is an ideologue at all. I think he wants to be Catholic.
Hmm.
Amazing
So
we have to say that this is a good development, that a pope wants to be Catholic.
So interestingly, this week there was, and one of the things I said and others when he was elected is, if you want to gauge what he's going to do, watch the appointments, and who he appoints to different things over time will be telling. So we did get a bunch of them this week. He appointed a whole new group to the dicastery that oversees religious orders, and among those, after Traditionis Custodes, are the Latin Mass orders, the Fraternity of St. Peter, Institute of Christ the King, Don Pastor, etc. Because Francis removed them from the CDF, which used to be the Ecclesia Dei Commission, and put them under this dicastery. So it has importance, specifically for the Latin Mass, but even more broadly. So he appointed new members of this institute, the dicastery: 5 cardinals, 5 bishops, 4 priests, 4 religious women, and 1 lay woman. Now, he had appointed, Pope Francis had appointed a nun, a plainclothes incognito nun, head of head of the dicastery, which is kind of revolutionary. Pope Leo did appoint another nun as her second, and now has appointed a lay woman to the head of this. We'll talk about that in a second, problems with that. But among the cardinals is kind of an interesting development. There's, first of all, Arthur Roche, the architect of Traditionis Custodes, who's never seen a Latin Mass he wouldn't want to suppress, and put in place a same-sex blessing. But next to that, along with it, Cardinal Pizzaballa and Cardinal Marengo, two people I talked with some people about during the conclave, Pizzaballa being one of them, the more, at least liturgically conservative. So what do you make of these appointments? Do you think what message do you read in these appointments?
Well, maybe that he's a conciliator. He wants the conservatives to be conciliated with the progressives. But this idea of putting a woman in charge of clerics in any way, shape, or form already works a major distortion in the hierarchical constitution of the church. You can't put a woman in authority over ordained clergy. Certainly not over bishops. Now, and not over priests. It distorts the fabric of the church. Women have their place in the church. They have a rather exalted place in the history of the church. They are doctors of the church. The greatest of all saints, the Mother of God, could not have a higher place. She is the most perfect of all human creatures. But Christ did not pick women to hold positions of authority in the church that he erected. He didn't do a casting call and then look for the suitable candidate without regard to their gender. He chose only men. He came as a man. It wasn't a coin toss. The incarnation from all eternity was going to be the incarnation of Christ as a man. God knew from all eternity that would be the case. So, and he picked only men. So to put women in charge of those who have holy orders is just crazy. It's crazy. But we'll see how that works out in practice. But it looks like we have somewhat of an improvement. At least we're getting a significant number, two anyway, conservative appointments to that dicastery. And by the way, they're all called dicasteries now. No more congregations.
Yeah.
First it was the Holy Office. Then it was the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Even that was too holy for Francis. So now it's dicastery. If he had stayed around, it would have been department sooner or later. The Department of the Faith.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the women, and again, it's really, I think, verging on sort of an attack on the divine constitution of the church. But equally to that, I think, is a lay woman, right? So, I mean, having a woman over priests, but having a lay person over, so even if it had been a lay man that he appointed to oversee priests would be, again, inverting the hierarchy of the church.
Well, that's the whole idea of Vatican II. We are the people of God. Right. And it's not a pyramid from the ground up, the people to the hierarchy at the apex. Oh no, it's upside down. The pyramid is upside down. The apex is at the bottom, and the people are on the top.
Right.
And none of this is doctrine, of course. This is the big problem with Vatican II. It's orientations that have come into fore, newfangled ways of thinking, new terms. Like dialogue, ecumenism, and so forth. None of it involves the imposition of any change in Catholic doctrine, which, of course, is impossible. Hey, by the way, can we jump back to the state for a minute?
Yes.
When you talk about women in charge, nothing infuriates me more than to turn on Fox News and watch these bottle blondes talk about how much bombing Trump should do. Did he do enough bombing? Was the ceasefire a good idea? No, one of these bottle blondes said, he called that ceasefire too soon. He should have kept up the pressure a little longer. I mean, what is this world that we're in when people with bleached blonde hair, women, tell men how to operate in the theater of war, how to conduct foreign policy, and we're supposed to sit there and take this all seriously? This is this is the culture of chatter. A lot of chattering going on. And the commentariat, and I find it intensely annoying. Just an aside, but
Well, and just so contrary to female nature. I mean, again, to be sort of a more warmongering woman is just bizarre, right?
Yeah,
Again, none
well,
of
they
this
want
war is
women to be in
necessary.
combat zones now,
Yes,
and
exactly.
they want pregnant women to be in jet planes wearing flight suits.
Yeah,
That has
exactly.
actually happened in the Air Force. It's
Yes,
unbelievable.
yes,
A civilized country doesn't send women to war, but as the great Juan Donoso Cortez said, uh, uh, when the faith is abandoned, you immediately return to the situation of the old pagan world,
yes.
pagan society. But not even the pagans sent women into war. So what
That's
are we?
true.
We're barbarians. Barbarians. The barbarians are ruling us, as Alistair McIntyre says. They're no longer outside the gates of the city. They're in the city and they're running the show.
Yes. Yeah, the late got rest in peace, Alistair McIntyre. But getting back to these appointments, I want to focus on Cardinal Roche because some people I think are jumping the gun and are celebrating this as a move.
Right.
This is a sign that in October, when Roche's term comes to an end, this is not Francis, Leo trying to sideline him is going to sort of give him an exit path out. Honestly, I'm with you. I read more into this. Can we all just get along? Like, let's just put you and Pizzapal, let's all get together and find a vivus, a modus vivendi to work together rather than you falling out of favor. So I'm appointing you here as a way to get rid of you.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
promotion removals are a really typical Vatican way of dealing with troublesome people. So the fact that he's giving him this appointment now, when is his term up for the?
October, his 5-year term comes up.
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised if that term expires and he puts somebody else in.
Mm.
Especially if Cardinal Burke has his ear. And let's not forget, it's pretty much well established now that he has been celebrating or has celebrated the traditional mass in private. I've even heard a credible source say that he had received an indult to do so.
Mm.
So if he has celebrated the traditional mass privately, he knows its power and its majesty and what it
Mm.
really means for the faith, and why people who have seen it for the first time, typically young people, are reduced to weeping, and they ask themselves, why did they take this away from us? So he
Mm.
knows all of that. He must know that. Why else would he
Yes.
be celebrating the traditional liturgy? So it may well be that in October, Roche, Roche's promotion removal becomes permanent, and he's in the
Mm.
other dicastery.
Mm.
We'll see.
It,
That would be really telling.
that
If
would
in
be, I
October
agree.
Roche is gone and someone less hostile to the traditional liturgy replaces him, that could be a very good sign.
It would be. It
I don't
definitely
think his mentality, the Leo's mentality, is such that he wants to crush the Latin Mass. I just don't see it in the man.
No, I don't see him want him to crush anything. Now the question is, how far will he reverse the crushing going on? Is to be
Right,
seen. But
right.
last quick note, a little funny story I saw because I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago. We may have when JD Vance went to the inauguration, he wouldn't bow to the Pope or kiss his ring or show any sign of as a Catholic. But I found this really interesting, and he gave a very Americanist explanation for why. But I found this really interesting this week. Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire, obviously very openly, religiously Jewish, went to see Pope Leo, gave him a White Sox or baseball, and bowed to him, which I thought was, again, he didn't kiss his ring, but he did bow as he took his hand, which I found really kind of very entertaining.
Well, because he's not a politician, he doesn't have to follow the protocol for leaders of nations. I'll give Vance the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he thought at the spur of the moment, or I don't know, maybe he did plan it out beforehand because he's thinking to himself, I have to meet the Pope. What should I do? Should I kiss his ring? Let me consult the American protocol.
Exactly. No, again, I think if he had just not done it and been quiet, I would have given the benefit of the doubt. Like, you're nervous. I mean, maybe he wasn't even conscious. But then to come out with this whole rationalization after, he should have just not addressed it. But in any event,
It's just another way of saying there's no authority on earth higher than the United States government. That's the fundamental principle of the
yep,
Enlightenment and the
yes,
political philosophy of John Locke. The legislature is the supreme authority on earth. There is no higher authority. And Hobbes, adding to that idea, right and wrong is determined by the highest authority, which is the mortal God, as Hobbes put it, which is the government, either the king or in Locke's theory, the legislature. So he feels that he is on an equal plane
Yep.
with the Pope,
Yep.
but he's not. So he should have, logically speaking, as a Catholic, gave a recognition to the Pope's authority. But maybe next time he'll behave differently.
Maybe next time. Well, there you have it. Our view of the world, the state of the church, Trump in the Middle East, and God willing, we'll see you in a couple weeks to see what's been going on in the church and state. But until then, we have First Saturday coming up. Remember the first Saturdays and your daily rosary.
And next time we meet, I'll be reporting from Lake Garda. So I'll
We'll
see you
see you
there.
in paradise.
Okay. Take care.